Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin here. I talked about a lot of different concepts in that overrated, underrated video that I did, and you wanted me to expand on some of those. So I'm gonna be spending 2 minutes to talk about some of those concepts that you wanted me to expand on. Let's go.
Okay, Justin, this comment is by Linguistic. They said that they haven't heard you discussing journaling much, if at all, on your channel. So they would love to see you go in more depth about how journaling should be approached / executed in order for it to be an effective tool.
Journaling, generally speaking, is going to be beneficial because it allows you to put your thoughts on paper and slow down your thoughts and make it a little bit more systematic. And that's where I think the key is. Journaling is not in itself always going to be effective if what it does is that it reinforces a negative thought pattern or a negative spiral. In order for journaling to be productive, by the way, not everything has to be productive, but in order for journaling to be effective and productive, it needs to conclude with something that is putting you in a better state than where you started off with. So that's gonna depend on the issue that you had. So let's say that there's an emotional problem. There should be some level of processing of that emotion. So here's an example. I had a terrible day, It was so terrible, I felt so bad about this. It was so bad, I can't believe I had such a bad day. If you just journal and that's it hasn't left you in much of a better state other than the positive benefit of being able to vent it out. But if you wanna take that to the next level, we can go deeper. So how did I react? What are some of the tendencies that I had? What are some of the habits? What are some of the approaches? What parts was I in control of? What parts was I not in control of? In reflection, what can I think about that I maybe didn't have the chance to think about at the time? So common strategies that we can go deeper into something is thinking about what are the things that we didn't notice the first time around, the reasons why something happened, environmental aspects of it, triggers to something, or potential hypotheses on how we could avoid it or deal with it better next time. You could follow that structure for basically any event that you're reflecting on in your life. It's a pretty broad, transferable, reflective practice. And if you apply that in your journaling, then you should find that it's going to be a little bit more focused rather than just waffling for 20 minutes every day.
Cool, just under. Johat Abrio says, great video, but he wants you to go in more depth into why studying at cafes can be beneficial and how changing your study environment can help the learning process.
The main thing is not the fact that it's a cafe. The main thing is that you came to a, number one, new environment that has tied to it a certain intention. It's not like saying, if you are at a cafe, there's something about the cafe environment that just magically makes you focus in. Like if you're there to meet a friend, and then at this cafe, it doesn't mean that you should then use that opportunity to then study. You're not gonna get like a magically beneficial effect. The idea is going to a new location that specifically puts you in an environment where the reason you came to that environment was for another intention and where you're free from potential distractors. So for me and for a lot of other people, when you go to a cafe, there's nothing else to do because you can only eat so much food and drink so much coffee. So if you're there with your stuff, you set up and you're in an environment, maybe you've got your headphones on, there's less distractions, and you're in an environment that's primed for your intention. Same thing as going to, for example, a library or going to university or somewhere else to study that breaks you out of the script of potentially bad, distracting habits that you might have at the place that you normally study. And the other thing is that the act of just changing your environment and just freshening things up is helpful for giving you a bit of a mental reset. It's very easy to get in a slump when you're trapped in the same room all the time. I used to work in an office that was in a semi-basement. I used to spend like 12 to 15 hours a day in that. The very act of literally getting up, moving around, going somewhere else, and just changing things up is enough to give you a mental break, reset, recalibrate, and then refocus.
Cool, 20 seconds under, doing great. Maybe we should shorten it to a minute next time. Okay, Slim Gunner says that it'd be great to see how to make the most out of a second brain system for higher order learning so it doesn't replace your first brain.
A second brain system is not really very necessary for higher order learning. And that's because the fundamental principle behind higher order learning is in creating higher order knowledge structures. So higher order learning as a process is about that deeply comparative, evaluative thinking. For example, see the upper levels 4, 5, and 6 of Bloom's revised taxonomy. If you want to look at the knowledge structures that you're creating, you're trying to create integrated relational knowledge structures. For example, look at the later levels of solo taxonomy. Those knowledge structures is what gives you expertise and what gives you mastery. When you have those types of knowledge structures that you created using higher order learning, it means that that knowledge stays in your head and you can retrieve and use it. The purpose of the second brain is for the type of information that either doesn't inherently, or is very difficult to, or is very time consuming to fit into that higher order knowledge structure. It's the type of information that you want to offload so that you can save those cognitive resources for the higher order learning. There are maybe a few use cases where that second brain could be a good supplement. Actually, the biggest one is that it gives you a sense of security because you know that all the lower order stuff, like the stuff you need to memorize, the reference numbers, the, formulas, drug doses, all that stuff, you could chuck it on your second brain that could be used as reference. Instead of putting them on flashcards, you could chuck them on a second brain. In fact, a lot of people use flashcards as a second brain, to be honest. So that as a security step could be really effective. Another thing could be if you want to create reference links for diving deeper into higher order points that you think are more likely to be forgotten, like you have integrated it, but you just want to make sure that you've got a reference link in case you want to go deeper into it. For example, research articles and case studies and things like that. I think it's time.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Okay, so time was up on that, but this is a really big topic. And actually, to be honest, all of these are kind of big topics. So if there's any particular concept that you want me to go even deeper on, then let me know in the comments and I'll try to make a whole video elaborating on it.
Nima Rashid wants you to go in depth about how you can do a dopamine detox.
Oh, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Actually, there's a video that came up from the Cajun Koi guys, Mike and Maddie. I think it's a video and they talked about like a dopamine detox routine and it's pretty good. Like I would recommend that. Do whatever you like. I'm quite into my photography. Partially, I think it's because I'm trying to justify the fact that I spent thousands of dollars on camera lenses. I try to go like hiking and take photos and things like that. And a lot of the time, if I'm out in the forest, I live in New Zealand. Okay, so there's a lot of forest and there's a mountain. You're usually off the grid. Like you literally don't have signal. So it's kind of a great way for me to just get off the grid in that way. If you're not in that situation where you're really accessible, it's not easy to get it physically off the grid, then just turning off of your phone, making it so that you're not going to be inclined to pick it up again, putting it somewhere like sliding it under your bed or really just removing it out of sight and then putting yourself physically in an environment that is free from all of those dopamine hit type of thing. So obviously you don't want your phone, you don't want really, I think, any electronic devices around you, like except ones that are like life preserving, like flashlights or like a locator beacon or something. Even like smartwatches, probably leave that at home. You really want to just eliminate all of that and then connect with something away from those artificial dopamine hits that you enjoy. Dopamine detox is not about removing dopamine from your system. It's not about doing things you hate. It's about connecting with that slower, more natural pace of dopamine release that you'd find in a non-artificially dopamine hitting world that we live in today.
This is Sleep Look. I give up saying this name. They just would love if you could give a deep dive, a 2-minute deep dive into sleep and how you can optimize it.
First of all, understanding when you don't have enough sleep. And then second of all, understanding the value of sleep hygiene. And I don't know if these are cliche and overstated topics, but I personally didn't really appreciate the value of this. So I'll focus on that. The first thing is that if you are chronically sleep deprived, it's possible that you actually do not know what it's like to be well rested. I legitimately didn't realize what being well rested felt like until I quit medicine and did like education entrepreneurship full time. I don't nap during the day. I don't wake up feeling, well, like I hate the world. But also I don't wake up feeling like, whatever I want to do, like I never want to get up. The feeling of just wanting to never wake up and the feeling like you need to take a nap every single day, that's not actually normal. It's not really healthy. You're probably at some level sleep deprived. The danger of chronic sleep deprivation is that you don't really know the impact that it's having on you until you compare it directly with being well rested. I didn't know how inefficient I was being until I was well rested. So how do you fix that? Sleep hygiene. The deep dive is going to be probably not doing it justice. I really recommend actually reading like a proper article. Just search for sleep hygiene rules. There's a book called Why We Sleep as well. I would really strongly recommend, if you're sleep deprived chronically, read that and properly invest in sleep hygiene. My pro tip for anything, rather than the deep dive, is to fully commit to it. Don't just use little bits of sleep hygiene and little bits of fixing your sleep because you've only got so much motivation. Intensively focus on throwing the whole bus at it. Do everything you can to optimize the sleep hygiene for like 3 weeks and you'll see results.
Okay, Richard would love to hear an elaboration on the Zettelkasten.
Zettelkasten is, go watch a proper video or read up about the note-taking system, but it's kind of adapted quite a lot from the original. But the original is that it's a relational card-based note-taking system that tries to create relational knowledge structures. And so from that perspective, it's very good. It's actually a very well-intentioned system. It forces you to constantly be looking at relationships between ideas. And there's lots of different apps that are based on Zettelkasten now. So even though the original methods were based on literal physical cards, now the cards are sort of more digital. The difference between that, for example, a flashcard is that flashcards are more about retrieval practice, whereas Zettelkasten is not necessarily. Zettelkasten is about having nodes of information that are connected together, and different apps will try to facilitate this in different ways. So in the modern day, there's actually quite a lot of flavors of Zettelkasten. Some of them are more effective than others. The problem that I have with Zettelkasten is actually not a problem I have with Zettelkasten as a system. The problem that I have is that Zettelkasten is only effective when your ability to process and prioritize the relationships is done correctly. It's very dependent on your deep processing ability. So if you have someone that is only used to lower order learning and lower order thinking, and they're creating low quality relationships and connections, then the network that they create using the Zettelkasten method will also be low quality. And so they will be very limited in the benefit that they get from it. And this is the kind of problem I have with a lot of techniques is that if you're too dumb, you will fail no matter what. Therefore, I think the first step, regardless of what method you're using, is to get good at the cognitive skill of higher order learning. And by the way, I actually talked to a world-leading instructor in Zettelkasten based in a university out in the Netherlands that teaches Zettelkasten. And they also said that the main benefit only comes once you have a good deep processing ability yourself first. Okay, so that was the end of the 2 Minute Tuesday. Is it even Tuesday? So that's the end of 2 Minute Tuesday. Again, if there are any topics that you wanted me to dive into more deeply, this I found was actually really hard to keep it super, super concise. But if there's something that you want me to explore in more detail, let me know in the comments and we'll make a full video on it. If you have any other ones that you want me to do 2 Minute Tuesdays on from my overrated, underrated videos, go on that video and leave a comment and we'll chuck it in the next format of this video. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.